1010 WOLB Baltimore and WERQ FM HD3 Baltimore.
The views and opinions of the guest and host you hear are not necessarily those of the staff and management of Radio 1, its sponsors, or advertisers.
Welcome to the Our Legacy Matters show, where we'll discuss how to secure, maintain, and transfer wealth to future generations. I am your host, Attorney Sherry Fleming. Now let's tune in. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks for having me again. Thanks for tuning in again to the Our Legacy Matters show. My name is Sherry Fleming, and I am a Maryland attorney, but this is just a reminder that I am not your attorney. So anything that you hear during the show, I encourage you to seek professional assistance from that of an accountant, an attorney, and anyone who would be in best position to help you and follow through on some of the information that you hear today. So today we are continuing to discuss trust. Last week, we started out with a foundational explanation about what a trust is. And I referred to it simply just being a container for assets that are given to a trustee to hold for the benefit of someone. And that someone is called a beneficiary. I encourage you to go to sherryfleming.com/Our Legacy Matters to review the content from last week. If you want to call in today, please feel free to do so at 410-481-1010. So in addition to laying a foundation about what a trust is, we talked about the benefits of having a trust, and I'll quickly review those. A trust helps you avoid probate. It gives you the opportunity to leave instructions for the trustee as well as the beneficiaries. You can protect assets that you want to give to the beneficiary from the beneficiary's creditors or ex-spouses, failed marriages. You can provide for loved ones who may not be responsible, either because they are minors or maybe they don't make the best decisions. You can provide for individuals with special needs, and that could be due to a disability or due to age. And you can also plan for yourself, do some long-term care planning, and basically removing assets from your ownership to allow yourself to be entitled to some government benefits. And lastly, a trust is usually mentioned first, but I mention it last because it simply just doesn't apply to a lot of people. It's minimizing or shifting tax liability. So those are some benefits of a trust that we discussed in detail last week. And this week, I want to talk about the types of trust. And I am going to talk about them in a broad sense because by name, I think we have like 26 some odd types of trust. Again, as a review, estates and trust law is state specific. So not all states have or permit certain types of trusts. And so you want to make sure if you're listening to this, again, that you seek advice for the jurisdiction that you're in. But in general, you can form a trust in three big bucket types, as I'll explain. The first type is revocable or revocable, depending on how you say it. I say revocable, tomato, tomato. The second type is irrevocable. And the third type is testamentary. And so a revocable trust is essentially what the word says it is. It is a trust that you can revoke. You can create a trust through a trust agreement, a legal document that is executed, and retitle assets to the name of the trust, and decide later on down the line that you no longer want to have the trust. You can revoke the asset that's in the trust, meaning you can take it out of the trust, or you can change and revoke the trust agreement altogether. Revocable trust are typically the type of trust that an individual would create for his or herself. So for me, as an example, if I am creating a trust, in our examples from last week, we gave the quintessential type of trust where I am creating a trust for the benefit of someone else. The trustee will be a secondary person. The beneficiary will be another person. And so with a revocable trust, I am creating a trust for myself and for the benefit of other individuals. And so I can decide the terms and conditions of the trust agreement, how I would want to benefit myself as well as other beneficiaries upon my death or disability. I can decide to be the initial trustee, hence revocable. I make decisions. So not only am I the grantor or the creator of the trust, but I am also the trustee. So with a revocable trust, I sit in two of the three seats that I named. Remember, you have the grantor, you have the trustee, and you have the beneficiary. So I can sit in 2 to 3 seats. So I am the grantor, the creator. I am also the trustee. And in many cases, I am the initial beneficiary. And so again, with a revocable trust, you can revoke the trust, change the terms, as well as change the assets in the trust and any of the conditions related to the trust. Like any other trust, a revocable trust avoids probate. So just to reiterate, when you are creating a trust and you are funding the trust or changing the title of an asset to the name of the trust, you no longer own that asset, but the estate owns that asset. Excuse me, the trust owns that asset, not the estate. The trust owns that asset. And so that asset is no longer within your estate and is no longer subject to probate because it is owned by the trust. So the asset that's in that trust is now private. It will transfer in accordance to the trust agreement. You won't have the delays of needing to go to court for a court order or approval if everything is written correctly with the trust. Sometimes there are ambiguities and things that are contested. And so sometimes people do have to go to court. But for the most part, if everything is done according to plan, a revocable trust will help you avoid probate or help those who are managing your estate avoid probate. Again, a revocable trust can be managed by you, the owner, until death or incapacity. So you are in charge when there is a revocable trust. You can do anything that you write within that trust agreement. You can alter that trust agreement to include terms that may have not initially been included. And so the reason why this is a good benefit for estate planning purposes is because you move the asset from your ownership to the ownership of the trust, and you're also able to manage the trust. And if you ever find yourself in a position that you are incapacitated or become disabled, then you can put in terms and conditions about who will manage the trust after you. We call that person a successor trustee who manages the trust in accordance with the trust agreement in the event that you become disabled, or should you expire, who manages the trust and what happens with the trust assets. All of these details go into your trust agreement. A revocable trust does not minimize taxes. It does not minimize your taxes. So a lot of people think, I want to create a trust because I want tax savings. It does not minimize your taxes. Why? Because you are still in charge of the assets. So as long as you're the trustee, even though you don't own the assets in name, the trust owns the asset, but you are the trustee, at least initially. So as long as you control asset and you have the ability to manipulate the asset. You can sell it, transfer it, gift it. You can leave it alone. You are in charge. And as long as you have what's called incident of ownership or power of appointment, a right to control the asset in accordance to the trust terms, you will be subject to the same taxes that you would have if you owned the property outright. Okay, so revocable, again, you can revoke it. You have control. You can serve as both trustee and beneficiary. If you say, well, the assets I'm putting into the trust, I don't necessarily need to benefit me, but I do want to have control over the assets that I'm retitling to the trust for someone else. So in that case, you can be trustee and not beneficiary. There's a number of ways that you can utilize a trust, particularly a revocable trust, to your benefit. One thing that I will say over and over and over and over again is that you really have to be clear on what your goals are, what you intend to do, how you intend to leave a legacy, so that you are creating an estate plan and using these estate planning tools to benefit you in the way intended to most likely reach those goals. The second type of or category of trust that I'll explain is an irrevocable trust. And again, the term tells you exactly what it is, the characteristics of this type of trust. An irrevocable trust is a trust that cannot be revoked. Once created, the terms are the terms stand. And once an asset is transferred or retitled to the name of the trust, you really cannot remove it just because you change your mind. It is irrevocable. When most people think of the benefits of a trust, this is the type of trust that they're thinking of. This type of trust, like any other trust, avoids probate. But there's also a fuller asset protection with this type of trust. And the reason why I say fuller is because you are removing title from your ownership, putting title into the trust, retitling the asset into the trust, and you cannot get it back. So your creditors can't get it. You can't get it. And so this gives fuller protection because you are basically giving your asset to the trust for a particular purpose. A revocable trust does minimize your individual taxes, your taxability or the taxation on that asset. Why? Because you no longer own it. And not only do you no longer own it, but you also do not have the power to control it. Okay. And so when most people talk about trust and they think about trust and they think about the powerful tool that a trust can be, in most people's minds, they are considering an irrevocable trust, not realizing how much power and authority and autonomy that you have to lose in the asset in order for this trust to really work for you. And I don't want you to be scared of an irrevocable trust because it is a powerful estate planning tool. However, my experience is that people who have not benefited from succession and receiving generational wealth, who are not used to having high valued assets, who are not used to being wealthy, there is a psychological component, some warfare that occurs when we have to have the conversation about the possibility of them needing an irrevocable trust. and then losing or transferring authority to a third party, and that third party being a trustee. So again, with an irrevocable trust, the trustee is in charge. The trustee makes decisions according to the trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So with an irrevocable trust, should you create one, you can be a beneficiary of the trust. However, you cannot be a trustee. You cannot have incident of ownership. You cannot have power of appointment. You cannot control the trust or the assets within the trust in any way, shape, or form. That's why you get the full coverage benefit. The maximum benefit of a trust is because you're no longer in charge. The last type of trust that I want to briefly mention is a testamentary trust. And this is a trust that is created by your last will and testament. So yes, you draft a will, and we'll discuss what wills are in later episodes, but you draft a will, and in your will, you direct the executor of your estate or the personal representative, that we call that party here in Maryland, to create a trust with the assets within your estate at death. This is it has a purpose. It's a useful tool in our toolbox for estate planning. However, it does not do what most people want done in creating a trust. It does not avoid probate. Your will is a document that has to be probated. And so if your will is what's creating the instruction or the direction for a trust to be created, then the items that you own and the items that's subject to your will have to go through probate in order to then transfer into the trust. And so there are many useful reasons why a testamentary trust can be created and should be created. But again, we have to go back and look at what your goals are. How do you intend on transferring wealth? Is avoiding probate one of the things that you desire to do? Because if that is what you desire, then a testamentary trust isn't going to work for you. And so again, 3 big buckets of trust, or 3 big types of trust. There are several names for trust, but for the most part, they fall into these 3 categories. The first one being revocable. You create it, you change it, you have control over the asset and the agreement. The second one being irrevocable. You create it and you give it to the trust. You back off, you step away, and you can be a beneficiary of an irrevocable trust, but you do not have decision-making capacity. Now, I do want to put a caveat, and the third type being testamentary, the trust that is created by your last will and testament. So we live in a world where not everything is final. There are always exceptions to the rules. So I do want to add a caveat about irrevocable trust. Irrevocable trust, the asset won't be returned to you. However, or may not be returned to you. However, if there's an issue with the trust, let's say it's no longer feasible for your trustee says, there's not enough assets or not enough money to really make this work for the beneficiaries. You have to pay for administration of a trust. And so sometimes having the trust doesn't work depending on the type of assets you have. And so the trustee says this is not a feasible situation. This is no longer working in the way that the creator of the trust thought it would work. And so the trustee of the trust or a beneficiary can petition to the court to decant a trust. Decanting comes from, if you think about it, decanting, most people think about decanting wine. And so with decanting, the trustee or beneficiary is simply saying, hey, court, we have a whole bunch of assets in this trust that we're supposed to follow the terms and conditions of this agreement to administer. But for one or a number of reasons, this is no longer working for us. So we want to break down the trust. We want to into different components. So the trust may be broken down into separate trusts for the beneficiaries instead of it being a pool trust. The trust assets from the trust may be removed because maybe it's just no longer feasible to have a certain type of real estate within a trust. It may cost the trust more money and administration to manage than it would be to give outright to a particular beneficiary, and all of the beneficiaries, if there are multiple, agree to that happening. Then yes, beneficiaries and trustees can go to the court to say, we want to make a decision, or we want to make changes to the trust that are in accordance with the law. And in that, with that happening, you are now asking the court to make a decision for you. Yes, there is some privacy loss, but if someone has to go to court to change the terms of the trust or to decant the trust, more than likely there is a really legitimate reason for that to occur. So I've given an overview of trust. I've given an overview of the types of trust, and I want to briefly give some examples. And again, if you have questions, feel free to call in 410-481-1010. And so I actually was contacted this week by someone who had a quick question, and I only answer quick questions for other professionals and colleagues, clients or individuals with quick questions outside of this show have to contact my office and pay an invoice. And so a colleague of mine had a question. They represent a single parent who is the parent of a minor child. Their only real asset that they have, they're not a homeowner, the only real asset that they have that would be transferred at death is a life insurance policy. They got the life insurance policy when they were young, which means the premiums are really low. The value of the life insurance policy is high. They want to keep it. And they're going to keep it. And they were trying to figure out the best way for the life insurance asset to benefit the minor child. And just so everyone knows, if you name a minor child as the beneficiary of life insurance, should the insured party decease while that child is a minor, the benefits of that policy goes to that minor child. Minors can own assets. They just cannot make decisions regarding those assets. And so if in this scenario, if you have a life insurance policy that's left outright to a minor, the question is, who has authority over that minor? The person who has authority over that minor then has authority over the life insurance policy. So in this call, I didn't hear about the surviving parent being deceased. So that surviving parent, if that surviving parent of that minor child has legal custody, then that surviving parent can access the assets in this life insurance policy. If that child has no surviving parents, then it's very important that either a guardian is named in the wills of each parent that once was living, or there's been a custodian of some sort, a custodian of property appointed for the child. You can see this is a whole topic for another episode, but just to give you this example, there's a lot of issues involving giving assets to individuals while they're minors. And then the question then becomes, even if they're not a minor, if you have a large insurance policy, do you want millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands thousands of dollars going to an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, something to think about. Some of your children may be sophisticated and able to handle it. I don't know that mine will be. Nonetheless, the question was whether or not the life insurance should go into a trust. And so, it would depend on that parent's goals. The more important conversation is the way in which the life insurance goes into the trust. If that is the case, the trust can be named as a beneficiary of the life insurance policy instead of the minor child. That was the initial recommendation that was made. But I was contacted for greater advice. If the trust is named as a beneficiary of the life insurance policy, that means the full value of that life insurance policy will go into the deceased parent's estate. And depending on the wealth and the other assets within the deceased parent's estate, we could have an estate tax issue. And so that may be something that the parent may want to avoid. Again, these are areas where you really need advice and guidance on your individual situation. Another way to do it, I won't say a better way, but another way to do it is to create an irrevocable life insurance trust, and otherwise known as an ILIT. And that is where the single parent would create a trust. That trust would be irrevocable, meaning that the parent would not have access to change the terms of the trust or to change the asset once the asset is transferred to the trust. And so the trust would be created, and the life insurance policy, the owner would no longer be the single parent. The owner would have to change to that of the trust, okay, with a trustee having oversight. And at the death of the parent, the proceeds from the life insurance policy goes into the trust. The difference with an ILIT and having a trustee having oversight over the policy and retitling the policy to the trust is that the proceeds of the life insurance, the value of the life insurance, is no longer within the estate of the single parent. And so that is a great benefit if you have or if you are using life insurance as a vehicle to transfer a large amount of wealth to a second generation. That generation is receiving that wealth through trust, tax-free. And you're also having someone else supervise that asset within a trust so that the beneficiaries can use it to the best of their benefit and not be spendthrifts or not be irresponsible with that. So I hope that example was helpful to you. Please remember to call in or email me if you have any questions. Email is admin@sherryfleming.com. You can go to the website www.sherryfleming.com/Our Legacy Matters to continue to submit your questions or any topic that you want discussed during this broadcast. I thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. Until we meet again. Thanks for listening to the Our Legacy Matters show. Connect with me, Attorney Sherry Fleming, at I Am Sherry Fleming on all social media platforms or at sherryfleming.com/Our Legacy Matters, or you can call us at 410-316-6800. Make sure you tune in next week for another discussion because our legacy matters.
The new 1010 WOLB with talk in the day and soul at night.